So it's my pleasure to host this very pertinent discussion on AI in financial services. From data analysis to automation, predictive analysis, cloud services, Fintech has come a long way. And now, most current are the advancements in generative AI, which we'll get into more today. With that, I'd like to ask each of the panelists to briefly introduce themselves, their role, and give our audience a little bit of context about the lens from which they're approaching the topic today.
Thank you. I'm Ranil. Boteju. I'm the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Lloyds Banking Group. So I am, I guess, ultimately accountable for delivering our bank's data and AI strategy. So we've been on this journey for many years, but obviously things have really accelerated over the last 2 or 3 years with generative AI. But basically, it's about building a scalable capability that we can deliver that really does satisfy regulators as well as our customers.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Hi, EJ Achtner, small startup, HSBC Bank. We are building AI, as we'll get into a bit later in the conversation. My role is threefold. One, responsible for actually building the capabilities used by our businesses and functions across our 60 markets. Two, working very closely with our regulators as well as our clients to help exchange thought leadership to make sure that we use said capabilities both ethically and effectively. And third, very important, is workforce transformation, making sure that our teammates around the world understand how to appropriately use these capabilities, and again, for productive gains and output. So all those things wrapped together.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nathalie Oestmann, and I have an advisory. I'm someone who's come through the corporate world into the fintech scaling world, into the early stage startup world. And in this space, what we've seen is a proliferation of using AI in order to get ahead, particularly with some of the pressures we'll talk about from VCs and to get product market fit quite early. So we're finding that within this space, it's kind of becoming part of the language to start to use this.
Brilliant. So let's get right into it. So AI is transforming the financial services industry in many ways. I'm interested to dive into how you're implementing AI and your process for doing so. So could each one of you share some use cases, some examples of the work that you're doing with AI?
Yeah, sure. Happy to go first. So I think it's worth pointing out that banks in particular have been using AI and machine learning for probably about 15 or 20 years. So the machine learning part, AI in the context of things like intelligent automation, chatbots, these are things that we've been doing for a while. So we've got some really kind of quite mature use cases around chatbots, intelligent automation, various fraud use cases. That is actually quite mature. The new thing though is basically generative AI. So that's obviously burst onto the scene in the last few years. So that's where that part is quite new, and that's where what we try to do is really think about how do we actually start to scale that. But using the current frameworks and infrastructure that we've got. So there's some builds that we need to do, new guardrails, and just some new risks that we're trying to avoid. But basically, the use cases, we've divided them into 3 buckets. The first is use cases that are really focused on the back office. So these are things of relatively low risk. So things like automating code translation, automating a lot of the documentation in the engineering world, creating test cases. Those are, as I said, relatively low risk. The second is a set of use cases where we have a human in the loop. So these tend to be things like, various knowledge management use cases or prompts for sales staff. In those, you've got a human in the loop to really validate some of your outputs. And then the third category, which we are proceeding with caution, is we're exposing the generative capabilities directly to customers. So this is where we basically want to get our guardrails in place before we actually start to scale those. So of the 3, it's the first and second that we're really proceeding with at the moment.
Brilliant. Thank you.
So great question. I'm going to separate what I would classify as traditional artificial intelligence, which has been well said around for quite some time, from newer evolving generative. So on the traditional AI and ML side, we have north of 500, probably pushing over 550 use cases in production at this point. Now these span our businesses and functions, our geography, Some things we've talked about publicly before is a great partnership with Google with respect to an anti-money laundering and fraud mitigation platform. We announced that a few years ago. We believe it to be world-class. And as you might imagine, for the breadth and the scale of our global operations and our 3 lines of business, AI and ML traditionally, are kind of throughout all of those across a range of different use cases. And we talk a lot about that on our website. When it comes to generative artificial intelligence, okay, we do need to, again, clearly separate that. Whether or not you put a date in or not, we do approach the underlying risk with respect to generative very differently, because while it represents incredible for potential opportunity and productivity gains, it also represents a different type of risk that must be analyzed approach, again, particularly across our global operational footprint. The types of use cases that we are looking at, very similar to likely other financial institutions, deal with everything from our knowledge workers, HSBC knowledge workers, as well as our engineers and our developers. We are starting to see through proof of concepts and pilots the likely beneficial kind of gains and benefits to be realized from that. But that also has to be done against the backdrop of true product market fit across our operations, which is a very delicate balance between, is the technology mature enough? Is the data estate of requisite quality? Are the regulations either satisfactorily mature enough for us to be able to have the confidence to bring a capability to market? And ultimately, are we solving a use case with a beneficial outcome for the customer or the shareholder? And those are the 4 things we need to look at critically as we advance a use case. Otherwise, candidly, there's a lot of success theater out there, and we have to be very clinical in terms of what we choose to do and where we choose to do it.
Nathalie, over to you.
Yeah, so we work with a variety of startups from early stage through to scaling, or in some cases transforming, meaning they have to rationalize their operating costs. Similar to large enterprise banks, they're going to focus on 2 areas. I'm sure you focus on many more, but when you're in a startup phase, you're growing and you're optimizing as you grow. So you're kind of looking at those 2 phases. And when we focus on the founders or the beginning teams, we call it a founding team, the team of 10, 30 people that are trying to get this product to market. They're doing everything, and the volume of things that are coming at them is really, really fast. So it fits in the growing bucket. How can you do many jobs and do them somewhat well? An example I'd like to give, just to give like a specific thing that we've done. I did make the joke that we make deep fakes, and you said it's not a deep fake because they are doing it, but we've been coaching founders who might be very technical and need to get their story across, but maybe they're shy or they don't know how to do that in a very effective way. We get them to go out there and find video generation software that uses the picture, and then they can put in what they're trying to say in a really nice way, and it produces a nice video that they can start using or practice from. These are kind of very specific things. We provide them with a whole toolkit of things that you could potentially be using for what, as you're starting to grow. But it enables them to focus on what's really important, which is finding finding the customers, finding the right product, finding that product market fit, and then, kind of working through those steps that you have to do in order to get your next stage of investment or get to your next customer and get that profitability, and keeping them really focused on the things that really matter, which is the customer and how that product works, rather than all the other things that can be very time-consuming.
Yeah. So there's a kind of time-saving cost element, and I think I want to dig into that a little bit more, because the cost of implementing language models, generative AI, there's a lot of upfront development cost involved in that. And I'm curious to dive into that a little bit more about where is the kind of budgets coming from this innovation, and is it coming at the board level? Is it coming from business units that are keen to kind of test ideas? Where do you see the kind of funding, and where do you see the returns on investment?
So the funding comes from 2 different sources for us. So there is a whole bunch of investment that is technology and data. So, we're really keen to build a really scalable foundation. So we want to make sure when we're deploying AI, that it's off a very consistent platform. So building the foundational platform capability that is kind of funded centrally. But what we're expecting is all of our business units then consume that foundational capability for their own individual use cases. So when it comes to really exposing those, whether it's to a back office or a middle office or even a front office use case, they would then fund that last mile in terms of building that last bit. So it's a mixture of both. In terms of the focus, and again, I'll separate AI versus generative AI, right? So for generative AI, which is quite new, for the last 2 years, we've really focused on products and use cases which are more about efficiency gains and productivity. So they're very much about making a complaints team be able to handle more complaints faster, or making frontline RMs more productive because they've got better knowledge management, or engineers able to code faster. So the metrics that we're looking at are really around how do you make workforce more productive and then do more with less people, right? That's really the goal. The growth part, for me, that's the part that we're still kind of starting on, and that's where we want to create more of the new use cases that are probably more likely to be customer facing, and which are about growth and reimagining, right? So if I think about all the use cases we've got today, they're basically taking what we already do and just do that better. They're very much in the augment space. That's where we are, and the reality is that's enough to fund us at the moment. But really, as we head into 2025, we want to really flip to, let's start to think about use cases that are about reimagining, whether it's a customer experience or a particular part of the business. That's where we'll expect to see significant growth rather than just efficiency and productivity.
Brilliant. Yeah, sounds really exciting.
It's a great question. I'm going to answer it similarly but quite differently. In my experience, I think it's an easy trap to fall into when any disruptive technology comes along, to believe that it uniquely and singularly, is going to now form kind of some net new thing. Okay? At the end of the day, we have a responsibility, and a stewardship for our customers to make sure they have what they need in terms of the financial services and products that we provide them. Okay? Lending money, taking deposits, mobile banking, wholesale, retail markets, and all those things that are underneath. The best thing that we can do is really make sure that we have an obsessive understanding with what is best for the customer. We have an idea and a strategy in terms of how to achieve world-class results. We fundamentally look at this as a technology that helps us get to better outcomes. So whether you measure your organization through KPIs or OKRs, this should not be like, something new. It should be an enabler to achieving better, more efficient, high-quality outcomes. And what I see, which is a very positive thing, is whether it's from board to the builder, the builder of the capability and everyone in between, there's an alignment that we understand that this is a capability that may, in certain cases, allow us to get there faster. I think we're proving out the will and the can and the how. I think the hypotheses we have, especially around a number of the use cases, that there's a high degree of likelihood that it does and will allow us to accelerate our strategic outcomes. But what comes with that is, especially if you're dealing with a large, mature technology portfolio with a large, mature, investment behind it, boards might be enthusiastic or excited about this, but they also want to make sure that you're delivering the returns for the shareholder, and they want to also make sure that you're satisfying your customers. So this is not something where you can just kind of walk in and rip up years of experience. It's fundamentally, how do you take the right approaches at the right level of risk to deliver better outcomes? And that's kind of the stage that we're in right now.
Right. Yeah. So what I hear you're saying is that we don't want to throw out the previous work that we've done before. We really want to use this new technology and use it to augment what we're looking our goals and bring that to help it achieve outcomes of high quality faster.
Yeah. Oh, we brought an AI to a contact center. It's now performing worse. I mean, who wants that, right? So, you have to do this in a way where you're achieving better strategic outcomes for the customer, for the shareholder, at a risk-adjusted level, and that's the balance that you always have to achieve.
All right. So, Nathalie, anything to
yeah,
add on that?
Can I just take it from a slightly different angle? Because actually your question makes a lot of sense when you're building enterprise grade and you have a lot of customers and it's money. So security is number one, and you don't want to ruin that trusted relationship. And the angle I'll take it from is it's not about funding. Well, it is about funding a little bit, but it's not about funding in the startup world. I mean, in the startup world, we talk a lot nowadays, because VC funding is at a minimum, about bootstrapping. You know, bootstrapped founders. I spoke to one when I was grabbing a coffee. It's, you know, working with your own money in many cases, or very little money, angel funding, and you need to get something that looks and feels usable out to market. So, you know, founders that I'm with are using AI obsessively, excessively, trialing it. Whereas within your organizations, you might have people who don't really try it that much, because what they do, you know, they don't feel like they need to, or, you know, and it's a slightly different angle where you guys are I'm assuming, so I don't want to.
You have to create the right incentive structure.
Yeah, because everybody needs to be able to do this if you're, you know, and within the startup world, trying and throwing something out if it didn't work is very easy to do, because you are pivoting until you find the right way, and the mistake is not as visible as it might be in an enterprise-grade organization. So it's a little bit different. It's about not spending as much money and getting an outcome that can get you there as quickly as possible, and it's about trying to achieve that next step in your journey as quickly
We
as
got
possible.
your payments there 90% of the time.
Not for you guys,
No.
for sure not, yeah.
Yeah, of course. There's definitely a different regulatory landscape and implications for risk. So that brings me to my next question, really about scale and moving from proof of concepts and some of these ideas that are moving into product market fit to then scaling and implementing in multiple markets with a number of different regulators and across different business lines as well. So how are you approaching that in your kind of day-to-day?
Yeah, so that was definitely a problem at the start. So again, I'm just going to talk about generative AI, right? So if you think about November of 2022, that's when, you know, ChatGPT 4 came out. And then within about 3 months, engineering teams and business teams all over Lloyds Banking Group were starting to use various, you know, foundational models, large language models, and we saw like a, you know, kind of a thousand flowers of, you know, kind of bloom, right? So use cases everywhere. And, you know, what I very quickly realized was two things. So unlike all of the previous technology fall storms, this was definitely something, there was bottoms-up demand, but then, I guess more importantly, a lot of the use cases seemed to be very duplicative. They were not scalable, they weren't using standard tech stacks, and so what we had to do very quickly was put in a much more of a control framework. So number one, we created what's called a control tower. So basically, you know, all of the use cases need to get filtered to make sure, are they building out our kind of core sort of foundational target stack? Are they going to create patterns that are reusable? And are they duplicating things that, you know, so we check those first. And out of that, we then have, I guess, a set of use cases that we're going to proceed with, or we are proceeding with. But that process means that now there's no duplication, there's a lot more coordination. We've got very much a build once, deploy many approach. And really the focus is on use cases that are creating repeatable patterns, as well as building out the core stack. So that's kind of really helped. We've also overlaid like a lot of architectural principles about when to build versus when to buy. Mm-hmm. So the sum of that means it definitely does feel a lot more coordinated. But you know, this is, you know, it's literally something where every week you'll find a different team at the bank with a new proposal, and you know, you have to say, no, we've already got that, or it's you know, so that process is quite constant, and so it's literally a monthly session of going through the full set of use cases, deduping them every month.
Fantastic.
Very similar and very well said. You know, at this point, you have to look at maintaining architectural discipline, which is hard because you also have a lot of enthusiasm. So then the balance is, how do you create this pipeline where you have, you know, protected, safe environments, back to the security question, that allow for proof of concepts? Then how do you identify those that do need to be pulled forward from pilot into scale. And then at that point, again, we use the term product market fit. It's very applicable here. Depending upon what you're doing and where you're doing it in the world, can you answer those 4 criteria? Do you have the requisite levels of high quality data and the appropriate levels of controls, especially when it's cross-border? Is the tech stack mature enough, with the partners or the inbuilt controls that you have to handle that use case or pattern? That's number 2. Number 3 is, are you actually solving a business problem, okay, that has, the sponsorship in the organization to have a benefit realized, again, that can be measured, and that is, depending upon the use case, maybe more or less difficult. And then ultimately, do you have the confidence so when you stand hand over heart in front of your regulatory partner, you can demonstrate good compliance through first, second, and third line of defense, that you have the right control frameworks in place, and that you can quantify and evaluate the performance of that model. And I think the last thing to say on this is the likely trend that we see is that the aperture, if you will, of what is now going to fall into that world of regulation is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And even use cases that historically may have been considered to be lower risk or more benign in nature are still going to have to go through, a type of, risk management framework and control assessment to make sure that it's fit for purpose. And that might mean very different things in different parts of the world.
Well, yeah, it's an evolving regulatory landscape at the same time, and obviously involving those parties in the development process is a useful exercise. Nathalie.
Scaling is the fun part. I think that's what we're all hoping for and all the things that we're working on for sure. And it all is very similar, right, in terms of whether you are a small company or a large company and how you scale. I think probably less coordination of getting the support while you're still trying to get the support from the market rather than internally as well. As the startups start scaling, I think it's just a maturity that needs to happen. It's not using so much of the tool, actually getting a marketing department, or actually getting beefing up the legal team. Not just using AI to give you your documents and reviewing them yourself. Those kind of things, the maturity things that you need in order to be a full-fledged company start to come into play. And I do think that is the fun part, because then you're building a real business, and then you've already got the AI and that kind of mentality embedded into it. Also hiring the engineers and not just using some of that tools, but just knowing you can do that in a more cost-effective way. Yeah. So those are the kind of things we kind of look at. It's very similar to what you would do in an enterprise-grade organization. There's with the added benefit of, easier decision-making, faster decision-making, ability to kind of innovate and implement faster potential. Mistakes are, you can say oops when you're a startup. You can't do that when you're HSBC.
Absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit more about talent and skills, and I think most of us will be aware that given the relatively newness of AI, particularly generative AI, there's a shortage of people in our kind of labor market with this type of talent and skills. And I want to delve into that a little bit more about how you overcome some of those challenges. Obviously, there's a big demand inside the banks, and obviously within startups that are looking to innovate in this space. So what are the kind of avenues that you're looking at in order to kind of bring this talent into the organization and into the startups?
Shall I start? Or are you going to start?
Yes, please do.
Okay, good. Look, I think with anything that's new, and I've also played in the crypto space, you need to wade through what's real and what's not. And we are in a space now where there's innovation that is happening at a pace that is unprecedented. And I'm coming from crypto, where I thought that pace was pretty quick. This is even quicker, and you need to make sure you're well informed when you're making decisions about what you're using, how you're using it, the the people that you might be partnering with, make sure that what's under the hood is solid, or if you're making buy versus build decisions, those kind of things. So I do think it's one of, we're in that space now where there might be more smoke than what might happen, and that includes your 500 projects maybe. You're going to find that some of them aren't the best, right? And it could be that they
better be there in production.
all 500, yeah? Yeah, so it is. It's like, you want to make sure you're putting your bets in the right place. And I'm just speaking from a place of, the craze of investment into AI, and talking to VCs, that there seems to be a desire to be part of that. So, picking the right ones is not so easy.
Absolutely, yeah.
So talent, I'm really happy you asked that question, because it really is the lifeblood of this, because it allows us to really kind of activate this beautiful combination of technology and customer need. So I'm gonna do something I don't ordinarily do, and that's cite someone publicly, and that's Professor Ethan Mollick, who came out with Centaurs and Cyborgs on the Jagged Edge. It's really the seminal work of external research on knowledge worker productivity gains. And what I think was very clear from that, also validated by our research, is that ultimately if you have a well-informed, educated, and well-integrated workforce who are using these capabilities, you have three things that happen. One, they know how to use the tools effectively. So that means you actually can get the measurable likely gains out of the combination of human and machine for a productive outcome. They know how to use the tools ethically, and that's obviously as, if not even more important, because they've been properly trained on the use of the capability for its intended outcome. And then the most important thing is that they're actually enthusiastic about it. And I think the elephant in the room is it going to take my job? Will it replace me? Do I need to act in fear of this? And the findings are actually pretty contradictory and contrary to that, in the sense that when you have teams of individuals who use this every day, who have been well trained on it, they see the benefit that it brings to them. They see and feel the benefit it brings to the customer. They see its ability to remove the drudgery of lower value tasks and allow them to focus on higher value tasks. So it's really the beauty of doing that, and this is why when it comes to workforce transformation, something we're very passionate about, we've launched and publicly talked about our AI Ambassador program, because we also realize that the cost of talent is going like this, and so amongst the best things that we can do is re-educate and reskill our workforce, who want nothing more than to come to work and every day to feel enthusiastic and engaged and be part of this transformation. So the best thing we can do is bring them along in that journey with us.
Oh, that's super. I mean, I think if the investment is made in the reskilling of the workforce, like you said, it will deliver those returns in the workforce, in the creation of the workforce, but also in the development, the personal development and growth of the workforce.
Yeah, so we've approached our talent strategy, so there's kind of two strands. So one's focused on practitioners, and so what we recognized is we need to sort of centralize some of the high-end skills. So we created a sort of a central AI center of excellence that's got about, probably 40 PhDs in it. So we've specifically hired people with the right skills, and that's where we incubate the new things that we do. And so they work with, I guess, the business unit embedded sort of decentralized team. So there's a consistent knowledge transfer. So hiring the right people is one of them. We've standardized how people approach building, for example, generative AI. So we've got a very consistent generative AI playbook. And then we've also done things like really scale our data science graduate program. So I think we've got 100 this year.
Wow.
So that's kind of the practitioners. Pardon me. What we've also done is, focused on the business users as well. So there's a really structured set of learning modules for people that lead a business unit or the top 300 leaders. And so, it's focused on how does generative AI really work, understanding ethics, how to commercialize, and workforce transition. So we've really focused on getting those ready to lead as well.
Got it, thank you. I really like that point you made there about also providing that training and that exposure for leaders who are making these decisions, giving them the opportunity to identify these strategic use cases and then bring them to the audience.
Yeah, so we started with our CEO. So that was like, we felt that we needed the CEO and the top team to really role model that they wanted to really learn and embrace this. So in terms of the business training, so we inflicted on our CEO and his top team probably about 10 hours of training with some of the PhDs in my team. And when everyone saw that, it's like, wow, if they're going to do that, we should as well.
Amazing, yeah. I'm going to move on a little bit and just go back to Nathalie on this, because I did hear that companies like Klarna are expecting to reduce headcount as a result of investments in AI, which seems like a very controversial thing in the sense, we want to make efficiencies, but at the same time, is AI going to take away jobs? So really, really kind of curious to kind of explore that a little bit more, and what are your thoughts on how it will play out?
I'll start by saying I'm making these comments, I guess, about this Klarna, which I'll explain in a second, as an outsider, because I'm not, don't have any insider knowledge of Klarna. But in August, a fintech, it's a buy now, pay later, or installment fintech all across Europe and the UK, they made some big announcements, the CEO and founder, that they were implementing AI across the company, and they had already reduced the workforce from, I think, something like 6,000 down to 4,000, and they were going to go down even more. I think it was something along those lines. So they were going to reduce their workforce by half, mostly in marketing and the customer service teams. And, that's a very bold statement to make very early on. I'm sure it's what's happening, but I would say it's a very early statement to be making, and that's what a fintech can afford, I guess, is they're making headlines because they want to be seen as being very innovative. They're probably looking for some more funding, and that using AI makes them a more valuable company, as well as profits in the customers, and they're probably looking to reduce their workforce anyways. So I would say that it's not a helpful headline, would be my interpretation of that personally. There's no doubt that we can improve certain areas, but at the end of the day, I think that the human, not intervention, but addition, as long as you're trained appropriately and you reinvent yourself in this new world, which we've been known to do, time and time again in this space, I think it will just help us to evolve. So my bottom line would be continuous learning in everything that you do. Make sure you are trying these tools out. Make sure you are making this part of your everyday. Make sure you are curious, and when you see a headline, try it, So that would be my advice.
Anything else to add on that stuff? Okay. So for my last question, I'd like to ask you about your vision for AI in financial services. We've talked about some of the use cases from AI in the existing use cases. We've talked about some of the generative AI newer use cases. Where do you see this going? I mean, will we be speaking to AI call center agents? Where do you see it going?
So maybe not in the first horizon, but definitely in horizon 2 or 3. I'd like to think that, as a bank customer, you could interact with the bank where AI is your channel, right? So we actually have started a multi-horizon program to start to build that out. So effectively, rather than dealing with lots of different parts of the bank, you're dealing with an AI agent who coordinates everything, whether it's how you plan your future, how you actually manage your accounts. So that is going to take a while, but we feel, it's definitely something that we want to start with, and really thinking through how we build that. So that's work that we've started, knowing that it's going to take at least a couple of horizons to get there.
So I'm going to answer it in 2 ways. One, I'm going to work backwards from the year 2030, okay? So we published a report publicly. It's called the Digital Horizons Report, and it posits what are the likely needs of the business community and the underlying talent from 2030 and how we need to kind of prepare and plan for that, particularly when it comes to business banking, corporate, institutional clients. The key trends were, in 2030, you would expect that AI in its various forms is very interwoven into the operations and all the myriad forms and what that means in the organization, okay? I'm gonna come back to that at the end. The second thing is, by 2030, Gen Z will very, very much be a part of the workforce. And if you look at the trends of where things are going with respect to Gen Z, they will not only expect, but they will demand that a level of tools and capabilities that they have now been growing up with will be a part of their workplace. So if you consider this in the context of either attraction of talent, whether it's how you would expect as Gen Z would to be operating in a business environment, to either build or be consumers of this capability, you're going to really have to plan for a future, and this is my broader and second point, where the business processes of how we conduct business today, which are largely predicated and based upon kind of humans, okay, are now much more reinvented, re-envisioned around kind of almost like an AI operating model. And that's not to say we're abdicating responsibilities around responsible and ethical use. It's going to have to be responsible by design. It's going to have to be true human-machine hybrid. It's going to have to really, work from a place and a position whereby organizations at that point in time are going to have this interwoven in a way that best serves the customer, best serves the business community. That's really kind of where we're looking for things to go likely by 2030.
Thank you.
Sure.
I kind of think we've been through changes already, and most of us in this room have, experienced the internet, have experienced the iPhones, have, experienced the move to mobile payments, that kind of thing. So we've already experienced these changes. I do have a strong belief that this movement will be the most transformational out of the ones I've just said. And it's really going to impact all of our lives. And I think that this is something that will happen actually a lot quicker than the other ones did. So I think it will be very fast to be part of our everyday language. And it will transform companies quite quickly. I also think we will see companies that haven't even been formed yet that will become really important. So I think there's a really interesting future ahead.
Brilliant. Any last advice for financial services businesses thinking about making strategic investments in AI?
I'll just start with one, which is, there's a build versus buy discussion sometimes, and if you are going to partner or build, I think that's there's a lot of very interesting companies out there doing some very interesting things. So that's a good way to start if you're not ready to build yourself.
Well, since we buy 100% of it, that's a joke. I can feel my LinkedIn blowing up right now. The key is, do you understand product market fit in the context of banking? There's a difference between enterprise, banking, and global banking. And you need to understand that if you expect to bring a capability forward, okay, whatever it might be, do you fundamentally understand the needs, the risks, the opportunities that the organization you expect to sell into, what they require. Banks are not shy about sharing our problems. They're well documented. But do you fundamentally bring an approach that allows us to do something better for our customer?
I'd say the focus needs to be on building a technology stack that enables scaling consistently. So it's so easy to just deploy lots and lots of different solutions, and it just doesn't work. So having a really consistent, scalable stack, I think, is very important. And then secondly, having some clear architectural principles about build versus buy. So if you've got those two things, you're less likely to duplicate and kind of do things in a very consistent way.
Brilliant. Thank you so much to my esteemed panelists. We've had a fantastic discussion here today. We've heard how financial institutions are moving into production, unlocking commercial value, and now beginning to see the returns on investment. So it's a very exciting space, and I'd like to invite you to join me in thanking our panelists today.
Fabulous. Wonderful panel. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you.